Next up is Rod O'Donoghue, who's published 2 books to date, O'Donoghue People and Places and Heroic Landscapes, Irish Myth and Legend. He also writes articles for a historical journal. He will read from his work in progress, The Irish of the Caribbean. Welcome, Rod.
Thank you. I was sitting in a hotel in Killarney in County Kerry in the early 1990s, and my wife called. She said that she had just read an article in a Sunday paper about the Irishness of Montserrat and that the O'Donoghue name was found there. I kept the article, and a decade later we had a holiday in Antigua. I now have visited nearly 24 islands. I started doing some serious research into the presence of Irish names, and one Irish thing led to another, and this book is the result. What is the evidence for significant Irish migration to this part of the world? A quick perusal of the phone book of any island in the Caribbean, whether historically British, French, Spanish, Dutch, Danish, or Swedish, will show many Irish names. The small Dutch island of Aruba has pages of Kellys. On the ex-Danish island of St. John, there are around 30 cases of O and Mac Irish names, let alone all the others. On Jamaica and St. Kitts, there remain places called Irish Town. On Montserrat, there are many place names of Irish origin, such as Kinsale, Cork Hill, Roaches Mountain, Sweeney's Well. And on Jamaica, Armagh, Carrickfergus, Clonmel, and Leinster Street. On Antigua, there are areas called Skerritts, Blakes, Fries, Lubies, Burkes, Tyrrells, all Irish from old plantations. The Irish left their imprint everywhere. The history of the Irish in the Caribbean starts in the early years of the 17th century and carries the stories of the dirt poor or virtual slaves to the richest landlords, in climates in which no European would last long. Intermarriage and plantation owners brought Irish names to African slaves, and many islands carry the lasting legacy of the original settlers, both those who came by choice and those who had no choice. My task is to bring their story alive through people and places in many different island circumstances within the context of local European and American history. There were many reasons for this migration. Some were voluntary, some were not. The first British settlement in the region was in Guyana in 1609, and there were Irish in the group, but it ran into difficulties and had to move on. After that, there was a steady flow. In the 17th century, the migrants might have been indentured labor, as good as slaves, forced labor, taken off the street and shipped out regardless of their wishes, convicts, adventurers, and soldiers and place seekers keen to get in the slipstream of some eminent position holder. By the early 18th century, the plantation society was well established, and there was a demand for particular trades or skills such as coopers or blacksmiths. The Irish armies had been defeated at the Boyne and Limerick in 1690 to 91, and soldiers were leaving Ireland to pursue their lives elsewhere. Many joined the Catholic armies of Europe, and some arrived in the Caribbean in French or Spanish service. The Catholics in Ireland were being persecuted and priests driven out of the country, and many went west. The famines of the 19th century contributed to the Irish migration, as did the need for labor after full emancipation of the slaves in 1838. The Irish appear in the margin of many history books of the region. I want to make them the centerpiece. That's from the introduction to the book. This next bit is from chapter 12, Local Colour of Irish Origin. While clearly the direct Irish presence in the Caribbean reduced over centuries, their influence remains strong. Every island in the Caribbean has something of an Irish imprint on it. To illustrate the range of Irish heritage, there are 10 St. Patrick's parishes and churches across the islands, and St. Patrick's Day parades and festivals on 5, Cuba, Grenada, Montserrat, Puerto Rico, and St. Croix. There is an area on Barbados called Irish Fields. Once we start looking for Irish surnames on physical places, they are found everywhere. Let's go over some of the connections that have been found over the years. Irish music and dance are distinctive. Catherine Dunham, the acknowledged matriarch of Black American dance, once noted the similarity between maroon dance formations in Jamaica and Irish reels. John Messenger highlighted that Montserratian music, with the use of fife and drum, similar to the Irish barron, and dance, heel and toe routines, owes much to its Irish heritage. Irish-style fiddlers were found on Montserrat until 1967. Messenger also described speech patterns with a local brogue that has Irish tones, the focus on the supernatural, and some local dishes. More modern generations have made much of this, even to the point of putting a shamrock on the roof of Montserrat's old government house. But these features today are peripheral to the dominant Irish culture, African culture. In 2004, I was sitting in a cafe on the top of the Blue Mountains in Jamaica, and I heard an Irish accent. I looked around to find I was the only white person there. I tracked down the person speaking, answering the question as to where his Irish accent came from. It turned out that he was from Trinidad, but had grown up in Dublin as his father was in the diplomatic service. You may say, so what? But I've always felt that the lilt of the Irish voice is very easily absorbed by others. It has a certain musicality, at least in the south of the island. This will have happened historically, and it is said that that lilt can still be heard in Jamaican and Montserratian voices. On one trip to Montserrat, I met the island policeman who introduced me to the Emerald Isle Community Singers. He was the only white man in the group. They were making a trip to England, and so I went to listen to them. Their repertoire included the folk songs, dances, and stories of Montserrat, and their primary goal is to research, collect, and preserve Montserratian folk heritage. Their name embraces the way the island feels about its Irish links, fused with many rhythms originating in Africa. The 17th and 18th century Irish, their country having one of the deepest mythological traditions in Europe, would have inevitably brought their superstitions with them, and there are some parallels with the African: mermaids, fairies, ghosts, witches, and omens. Messenger provides a few stories. Here's a couple. A white-skinned maiden lives in a lake on the top of Chance's Mountain on Montserrat. She has a companion, a diamond snake. She can be seen sitting on a rock beside the lake, combing her hair, like the Irish banshee. If someone can grab her comb and run down the hill and wash it in the sea before the snake catches him, the mermaid's buried treasure becomes his or hers, similar to the leprechaun's crock of gold. The fact that the Montserrat mermaid is white may be an acknowledgement of the historical Irish culture of the island. The puka in Ireland was a fearsome creature who operated in the dark and would attach itself to an innocent traveller, from which there was unlikely to be a happy ending. It could be any animal, but a dog was very common. In front of the Catholic Church in St. Patrick's Village on Montserrat, a huge dog with a bushy tail is said to be seen occasionally. This puka seems to be a bit more benign than the Irish one, but has the same generic behaviour. One of the most popular folk songs on Montserrat celebrates emancipation, and the main character is named Riley, an Irish name. The 1st of August is Congin. Hurrah for Ninkum Riley. If Buckra knack me knack again. Hurrah for Ninkum Riley. Ninkum Riley, the only literate slave on Riley's estate, was reading the Proclamation of Freedom and was saying that if a Buckra, or white man, knacks or kicks him, he will kick him back. Olive Collins relates in her book, The Tide Between Us, in the mid-1990s, I attended a St. Patrick's Day party in Israel, where most of us were Scottish, Welsh, and Irish. A man from Jamaica joined our crew. He sang along to the Irish songs and even had his own version of the song, The Wearing of the Green. I assumed the Jamaican liked Irish folk music or had spent some time in Ireland. He told me he'd never been to Ireland. However, he identified his heritage as Irish. There are tales in Ireland that include the Caribbean, but those are for another day.
Thank you very much. And Fascinating History, Rod, from Thomas Cull. Marjorie wrote Fascinating Love History, an interesting exhibition in Newfoundland showed people of Irish origin and those with the same name from Waterford, and the resemblance was incredible. A strong Celtic fiddler tradition too. And also James McDermott. It is fascinating that after nearly 100 years of BBC received pronunciation, regional and national accents survive and thrive. Long may it last. So thank you very much.